Alexa, reheat 1 cup of coffee.
Starting coffee. 1 minute, 15 seconds.
Well, that's a little bit of convenience that has been added to my den here in Cambridge. This is Len Edgerly with the Kindle Chronicles on Thanksgiving. I have the Alexa microwave set up next to my desk, and I can have her reheat a cup of coffee so that I'll be ready and caffeinated to finish up the show early this week, because Darlene and I are going to be flying to Omaha tonight for the wedding of our nephew Stephen and his fiancée Kira, and then we're off to Denver after that and then back to Cambridge. But today I have a good show for you featuring Sarah Gelman, who heads up the Amazon team that recently put out the best books of 2019.
We really want to choose books that we feel like customers will love, or in a non-pushy way should love.
Let's first go to one news item I want to tell you about, and I heard about this from Marie Sotiriou, who sent me a link. It was an article, Alexa's voice can now express disappointment and excitement, that comes from Jay Peters in The Verge. What this shows is, sometimes I wonder, what are these thousands of people that Amazon has hired to work on Alexa actually doing? And this story gave me a chance to dive in and see some very impressive things that fall into the category of helping the Alexa voice sound more natural. And the way it works is there's a link in this piece to the Alexa Skills Kit blog. That's where The Verge got its information, and it talks about the Speech Synthesis Markup Language, SSML. What this does is enable developers of Alexa skills to not only enter text that Alexa is going to be responding when a customer asks a question or does something, but to shape that text in ways, some of which have already been in existence and some are new with this announcement. One of the ones which they announced today is called domain. That's a tag for SSML. And if you go to this post, you're going to see, if you're a coder, you're going to see things which you understand. For a civilian, it's really diving deep into what lies beneath Alexa's voice. But this domain tag enables the text-to-speech Alexa voice to sound like a newscaster. It's only available in English for US and Australia at this point. And another choice under domain is music, and that's style speech for talking about music, video, and other multimedia content. I'll play you a couple of clips that show the difference between the news voice or mode for the U.S. versus Australia.
San Francisco's $2.2 billion Grand Central Terminal open. Spanning 3 city blocks, San Francisco's $2 billion transit terminal is open after nearly a decade under construction.
That was the news voice in the U.S., and here's what it sounds in Australian.
Former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has been freed after more than 18 months in prison. The left-wing former leader, known as Lula, was...
I know, Australian isn't a language. That's English as is spoken in Australian. So here what you see is there's a mode that simulates a newscaster, and it's now available in these 2 dialects. The other mode, which is for talking about music, video, and other multimedia content, it's slightly different. It's a softer kind of, the way you would be talking about music as opposed to hard news. And that, again, is available in either Australian or U.S. dialect. The other new capability that developers have is to add emotions, and that's a separate tag which is called Amazon:emotion. The possible values are excited or disappointed, and each of those can be low, medium, or high. Here's what that sounds like.
I'm playing a single hand in what looks like a losing game. I'm playing a single hand in what looks like a losing game.
Those were the low and the high versions of the disappointed voice. Here are the low and high settings for the excited voice.
I'm playing a single hand in what looks like a losing game. I'm playing a single hand in what looks like a losing game.
Now, true to form, Amazon is not just putting out these capabilities for developers, but they're also including on the site best practices advice on how to use them, because the purpose of all these things is, of course, to delight customers, have the customer experience be absolutely as good as it can be. So under the advice to developers for using these new speaking styles, it says don't overdo the use of Alexa's speaking styles, as this can create a poor or unpleasant customer experience. For example, don't switch between different speaking styles extremely frequently. An example of how this can be used, they say if you have Alexa respond in a happy or excited tone, you might do that if you've got a game on Alexa, and if the customer gets a right answer on the trivia, the response can be set to respond happily. Good job, you did great. And then I love this one. You could have Alexa respond in a disappointed or empathetic voice when the customer asks for a sports score and their favorite team lost. And of course, that could all be programmed in depending on where the location and things like that. So I love this because of the innovation that it indicates, and just because like I said, I'm curious about what can all of these thousands of people do to work on the Alexa platform. Jeff Bezos, a couple of years ago in the shareholders' letter, pointed out that it was clear Alexa was one of the experiments or innovations that has got lots of promise, and so he said we're going all in. And when he goes all in on something, that means putting all kinds of resources and talent on it. And when you can hire really smart people to work on something like this, you come up with this level of refinement in what the Alexa voice is able to convey. On the blog post, it mentions somebody on the Alexa team who's in charge of this development, and I've reached out to my folks at Amazon to see if maybe I can get him on the show for the week after next. That'll be helpful because we're going to be traveling in Europe between December 10th and the 20th, so I'd like to record in advance a conversation to see if we can find out more about these new tags and abilities of Alexa. For the tech tip, I want to tell you about another innovation which I find interesting, and this is something which you can use on a Fire TV, whether you've got a TV that has Fire TV capability or you're using the Fire TV stick. It's a first-of-its-kind news reading app developed for TV, and naturally it's from the Washington Post, which is owned by Jeff Bezos. I tried this out. You navigate from the home screen on the Fire TV, and you look for apps, and there's a little bit of hunting around, but you're basically looking for an app that says that it's under the news category, and it's the Washington Post. I tried this a few nights ago. You can scroll articles. The articles are curated so that what you're seeing is something from the day's news. It's very topical. It's not a fabulous way to read a newspaper. I mean, you're sitting there and you're seeing the article scroll up on your TV screen, and you can control it with your clicker. But it's intriguing, but the real payoff is that if there's a video, which frequently there is when I'm reading the Washington Post on my iPhone, there's videos and I can watch. But if you pull up a video in this setting, all of a sudden it's commanding your whole TV screen, and it becomes a much more dramatic way to see a video that's embedded in a news story. One that I tried when I was doing this, it was a fairly long video, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and it was about the espionage charges against a Washington Post reporter, Jason Rezaian, that resulted in him being held in an Iranian prison for 18 months. And the video simply told the story, that how he had been charged under false pretenses for espionage, and the very difficult negotiations to get him released, which had to do with the Iranian nuclear deal, which was accomplished in 2016. One thing I noticed was that, of course, it's very exciting when he finally does get released safely. At the time, I was pleased and just sort of intrigued to see that Jeff Bezos met Jason in Germany in a private plane and flew him back to the the United States. I think, as I remember, he said, "Where would you like to go?" And Jason and his wife said Key West, so he just had the plane fly them to Key West. In this video account, there's no mention of that. There's a couple of scenes where Jeff is there greeting him, but they completely underplayed his role in flying him back. I think this app is an example of innovation, this time for the Washington Post, and which Bezos acquired in 2013. I remember at the time he told the employees he was going to create a long runway in which they were going to try to figure out how to have a newspaper succeed in the Internet age and actually take advantage of the Internet instead of being crushed by it, which has been the normal story for newspapers across the country, especially smaller local papers. And that investment on his part led to the hiring of scores of new reporters. And then the technological side, I think, is a little harder to see. But here's an example where they're taking it to an entirely new way to consume the news, which is television, and doing it very well in a high-quality way. I'm not sure this is going to increase the subscriptions to the Washington Post or add to the revenue, but the Post did become profitable, I think, in 2016, just 3 years after Donald Graham sold the paper to Bezos. And this one is an example of lots of technological innovation at the Post that's usually not visible, but taken as a whole, it's probably resulting in the success. And I think that the digital views have surpassed the New York Times, and the competition between the Times and the Post on covering the news goes way back. But now I think the Post has got a bit of an X factor in that its owner is someone who knows how to disrupt an industry, and in this case, perhaps save at least some parts of an industry through innovation. Time now for the interview. Sarah Gelman worked in public relations at Random House in New York City for 8 years before moving across the country to Seattle in August of 2009 to work in PR for Amazon. This year, she moved to director of the Amazon Books editorial team, which recommends great books the old-fashioned way by personal preferences instead of algorithms. The Amazon Books team recently released its curated list of the best books of 2019. Now, Sarah is one of the first people that I actually met at Amazon, beginning with her early days at the company, and she helped put together many of the interviews that I've done over the years with Amazon executives. I've never had a chance to interview her because she was always setting up other interviews, so I was pleased that now that she has her own executive team position with the books team, that it would be fun to have her on the show, and she was eager to join me. I caught up with her by Skype in Seattle on Monday, November 25th, and I began by asking what she remembers about the big personal and professional move that she made a decade ago.
I remember very clearly I had been sick one week, like really sick, and in my apartment for a full week. And, you know, you have a lot of thinking time when you're alone for a week. And at the end of the week, I was finally feeling like a human. I went outside and I sat on my front stoop, and a couple things happened. One, there was an apartment for sale in my building, and it was on the floor above me, and it had 2 floors. And I just started thinking like, oh, and it also had private outdoor space. And I was thinking, I need that apartment. What can I do? I'm going to sell my apartment and buy this apartment. It's like crazy. And I'm thinking in my head, like, how am I going to get this done? And then one of my best friends who lived in New York walked by with her fiance, and they were on their way back from Bed Bath & Beyond, and then someone walked by with a dog. And I just sort of thought to myself, okay, I was single at the time. I really wanted a dog. I love animals, and I had a cat. And I also really realized I wanted private outdoor space and a flight of stairs in my house. It's such a weird thing to feel like this is something I really want. And I was happy in my job, but I felt a little stagnant. And I just felt like I wasn't living my life. I felt like it was living me. And I realized, hey, you're single. Like, you can do this by yourself. You're the only person that can make this decision. It's not a husband that's uprooting to a job. And so I went inside from my stoop and thought, okay, there are a couple companies I love. What are they? And it was funny because Amazon was one of them. I just thought in publishing, Amazon was always doing such interesting things. And I was always reading about what they were doing. And I was surprised all the time. And the other company, ironically, was Whole Foods.
Huh.
And I've always loved Whole Foods as a customer. And so I started with Amazon because I thought Seattle over Austin. And my brother lived out here. So I looked for a job and I found it and I applied online. And the next thing I knew, I had an interview. And from there, it was about a month and I moved out here.
So was it about a month after your thoughts on the stoop and that?
Yeah.
Wow.
It really was. It happened very quickly, but I moved to New York not knowing anyone when I was in my early 20s, so I felt like I could do it when I was 30, and I knew I could do it moving to Seattle.
Huh. Wow,
yeah.
That's a great story.
Thanks.
Sometimes it just seems like things align and your inner promptings match the external opportunities.
I kind of trusted my gut, and I met my husband, on my third day here. And we've bought our second house. So I've lived in a couple places, but my first place here was a townhouse with stairs and private outdoor space. And within 6 months, I'd adopted my dog, Lucy. And I just kind of made it happen.
And now you have a yard, I assume. You've got 2 children, 2 boys.
A yard, 2 boys, 2 cats, still have Lucy, and my husband.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
The power of visualization.
Yep.
Well, and when you were in New York, were you working for Random House that whole time when you were in New York?
I was. I started at Ballantine, which is was at the time just an imprint of Random House Incorporated. And then I went to Knopf after 9 months at Ballantine, and I was there. I actually left on my 8-year anniversary with Random House.
How did that work prepare you for what you have, what you started out doing in PR for Amazon and what you're doing now?
I mean, it's funny. I was a book publicist, and I feel like I learned so much in that job. It's like kind of like being a waitress or a waiter. I feel like everyone should be a publicist at one point. Working with high-profile authors really made you anticipate needs, and it's what we call here like looking around corners. So I was always thinking ahead, like, okay, I'm driving up to a building with a very well-known author. I worked with Barbara Walters, for instance, and I would say to people, okay, well, I'm coming up and I'm in a purple dress and I'm with Barbara Walters. And then I would get there and realize I have no idea who we're looking for. And as soon as we'd step out of the car, people would swarm us. And so I took from that, like, okay, always know what the person looks like on the other end that you're supposed to meet. And it was just little things like that really made me sort of anticipate needs of other people. And I think also in publicity, we're so used to rolling up our sleeves and just getting stuff done. So whether it was, something really glamorous or something not glamorous at all, like I worked with an author that liked a particular kind of water and I had trouble securing it. I called a distributor. They wouldn't sell it to me in bulk. And so I literally walked around New York with a canvas bag and I bought as much as I could, carried it to my apartment, and then I had it messengered to the office because it was too much for me to carry even in a cab. And it was just kind of like, you just get stuff done.
Yeah.
So, and I felt like I understood the publishing industry. So I think I thought that I didn't know as much as I did because I was just in publicity, but you pay attention and you learn a lot. So I think coming here to Amazon and understanding the world of publishing was really helpful.
Your current job, it's director of books, PR, and editorial. You're heading up the Amazon Books team that does the picks that we're going to talk about. But are there other responsibilities folded into what you're doing now?
Yeah, so it's awesome. I spend 100% of my time working with books, and half of it is, or I say I have 2 full-time jobs, but it's half and half. So half of it is leading our books PR team, and we're doing everything for promoting Amazon publishing, books and authors, to working with KDP authors and talking about all the great work that they're doing and how they're really making a living at their craft. And then all the cool features that we have in the Amazon.com bookstore and the Kindle features too, and the Kindle app. And I love both of my teams, and the PR team is awesome because we're all such voracious readers, and we do 2 sort of geeky book things that we always say that at Amazon, we talk about how we're peculiar. So this is the way that the books PR team is peculiar. We call it our books reader board. So sort of like a leader board, but it's the reader board. And we post outside of our area what we're reading that month. And so it's a way to tell our colleagues basically like, hey, we're the books PR team, and to talk about the books that we love. And then also in our biweekly team meeting, we always go around the table and we do just a sort of general update. So it could be anything from like, hey, I'm on vacation later this week. here's who's watching this, to here's what's happening with this program. And then we always talk about the book that we're reading. And so we really identify as book people. And then, yes, leading the books editorial team as well, which is a team that I've worked with the whole 10 years I've been here. But this is a different way that I'm working with them.
Well, one thing I remember, I think when we first got to know each other through Amazon on the podcast, it was before you had children. And at that time, there was talk, there was the New York Times article about people crying at their desks at Amazon. And that's something you hear about. I also hear counters. I talked to Brad Stone a while back. I said, what do you hear about Amazon's culture? He said, I hear people that say it's rough, and I hear people say that they love it. It's just, it's a mix of perceptions. So, but I remember thinking, here's a young woman starting a family, doing pretty high-level stuff at Amazon. I wonder how sustainable that's going to be in terms of maternity leave and just the pressures of your job versus balancing with your family life. So, I mean, I don't want to pry into your personal life, but if you're willing to just sort of describe what one woman's path has been through this company, balancing that, I think it would be of great interest.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. Obviously, I love working here. I would not have been here 10 years, and I have no plans to leave if they'll keep me anytime soon. And I would say, it's really hard work being a working parent, and I think it's really hard being a working mom in particular. There are just things that moms need to do that dads don't need to. And it's definitely been a challenge. But I was really lucky when before I even had told people that I was pregnant with my first son, it was right when the new maternity leave was announced. So our new leave is 1 month prepartum and then 4 months postpartum, up to 4 months postpartum. And I remember I was actually sitting in our first Amazon bookstore. It was the day before we were opening, and we were about to do a Seattle Times interview to preview the store to a reporter. And the woman that headed up the bookstore at the time, Jennifer Cass, turned to me and said, wow, this is going to be amazing if you have children. She has twin boys. And she was the first person I told at work. I just turned to her and said, Jen, I'm pregnant. And it just came out. I think I was about 10 weeks pregnant. And I actually found out the gender of my son that same day at the store. Yeah. So I feel like that store is really special to me. Yeah. And I named my son Max after a book, Where the Wild Things Are, too. Right. But I took the prepartum leave both times. I am on the maybe older side to have babies. And I definitely had challenging pregnancies. I was tired. I didn't feel as sharp as I normally do at work, which was really hard. And it's a lot to be pregnant, I think. And visually, you're it's out there. Yeah. And so I took the month off before both my kids. And that was really it is, to me, the most generous part of our leave. And both times, my health totally stabilized. I had both my boys 11 days early. So it was great to actually have the time off, and I was prepared and not in a meeting and then not at work the next day, which it would have been had I worked up until my due date. And with my first son, I took 5 months off. I did an extra month of personal time. So I was gone for 6 months total. And I came back, and it was challenging because I wasn't sleeping that well. But people were really understanding. And I've sort of made a choice as a female leader to be pretty upfront and honest about when I have to do things with my kids and when I'm balancing things. So I've gotten advice from coaches to say I have an appointment this morning, but I like to say I'm taking my son to his 12-month checkup this morning, because I want people to know that there are other aspects of my life other than coming to work, and we're all balancing. It doesn't matter if you have a sick cat or, a leak in your house. We all have things we take care of. And the truth is, our jobs are not 9 to 5. And I think some people at Amazon have jobs that are very set hours, but mine are not. And so if I need to take my kid to the doctor, and then that means I make up that time sometime else, then that's okay. And it's okay for me, for my team to do that too. I just want people to know, I have other things going on besides work. And I think that makes me a better employee too.
I think I've read or heard Jeff speak about not sort of speaking against the idea of balancing work with personal life, but that if you are motivated and engaged in both, that that the balance sort of comes without it being a zero-sum game. But have you got a version of that insight, perhaps, as part of Amazon's culture?
Yeah, it's funny. I was on maternity leave for last New Year's. My son was born last November, the second son. And I decided to create a word for the year, and my word was balance. So it's sort of funny. I think it's a little counter to what Jeff said, but I think the spirit is the same. It's just that I need to be mindful of that word because there have been times, and definitely before I had kids, where work was 100% of what I was doing. And I realized that I'm just a better person all around if I'm balanced. And that means that I am a mother 100% of the time, but I also take time for myself. Exercise is really important to me. I read for my job and also just to keep myself sane. And that all goes into being a whole person, I think, and showing up at work and having energy and being creative.
That's cool. Well, let's turn to the best books of 2019.
Yes.
This is good because now I have some sense of the rest of your life within which you read all these books and to get so deep. As you step back from did you tweak the process at all as you came into this in terms of just how to handle all of these potentially great books in getting your team to do the work?
Not a ton. I feel like, I don't know, when coming into a new team, and I'm still relatively new to this side of the team, I feel like there's the do no harm mentality. And this team has been, they kill it at Best Books every year. So I came in and I was an observer to this process. I think it was hard because I came in halfway through the year not having read a lot of the books that came out in the first half of the year or not having read them in the same way that I would have. So I did a lot more catch up at the end of the year, and certain books I just feel like I missed. So I was around the time that we announced Best Books of the Year so far, I was reading a lot of those books still. And then I felt like I had more of a handle on books that were coming in the second half of the year.
What do you have in mind when you're making this list of the best books? Who is it for? What's the kind of vision that you start out with when you assemble this list?
We really want to choose books that we feel like customers will love or in a non-pushy way should love. So it's not necessarily about books that are bestsellers. And, often our books, it's great if they're bestsellers, but sometimes they're not. And we're reading books for our best of the month list about 3 months out or even more. So, sometimes they do have pre-orders, but for a debut novelist, it's really hard to get pre-orders at that point. So we're not looking at sales numbers and saying like, oh, this is going to be a big one, we should pick this. It's really based on our taste. And I think it's really cool that at a company like Amazon that relies on things like machine learning, we have this team of people. We have different kinds of expertise. Someone is an author, someone was an editor, someone was a book buyer. I was a book publicist. We're all book lovers. Someone was a bookseller in a brick and mortar store. And we're all reading and we all have specialties. And then we're basically curating lists of books that we think customers will love. In the same way that when you walk into a bookstore, you're seeing staff picks. Like these are our staff picks, essentially.
Yeah, it's sort of the company's staff picks.
Right.
Yeah. You've got the top 20, and then there's categories. Do you know roughly how many books in total appear in these lists and the categories that you chose in?
So I didn't do the full count, but we have a top 100 of best books of the year. So they are ranked 1 to 100, and we actually bucket out usually by groups of 20. So we look at our best of the month list. We look at any books that we feel like we missed, and we have a huge spreadsheet. And then we go through literally every title and we talk about, is this a 1 through 20? And then from there, we narrow down to, 1 through 5, and like 1 to 3 is really the hardest. And then from there, it's, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, and we go up from there. And then we're looking within those groups of 20 and sort of tweaking things and rearranging them. So top 100, and then we have top 20 lists in a bunch of different categories. So everything from mysteries and thrillers to literary fiction to different ages for kids. So we have overall kids, we have kids 0 to 2, 3 to 5, on up through YA. So there are a lot of books that we're looking at and curating. There's a little something for everyone.
It looked like there are some of the books in the top 100 who are also showing up in the categories, but
That's right.
Are there other books in the categories that are not in the top 100?
There are, definitely, because it's not like we take the top 100 and then split them out into categories. So one of the good examples of that is in cookbooks, food, and wine. So often we don't see those in the top 100. And so the top cookbook of the year is a book called South by Sean Brock. He is a really kind of exciting new chef. I think his restaurant's in Charleston. And so that's our top cookbook of the year, but it's not on our 1 to 100 list.
I see. When you get down to those top three, the Testaments by Margaret Atwood, the Nichol Boys by Colson, Whitehead, and Wild Game, My Mother, Her Lover, and Me by Adrienne Brodeur, you spend 5 hours thrashing out which is 1, 2, and 3? Does it get heated? What's that final choice like?
It is heated. I've heard someone on the team say we decide the top 100 by fighting, or by arguing. Sorry, and it's true. I mean, I don't know. For me, the Testaments was a clear choice for number one. I mean, I feel like it's a publishing moment, and this is a bold statement, but I'll say it anyway. I'm not even sure the Testaments was my favorite novel of the year, but to me, it is the best book of the year. It's such a moment in publishing, and the fact that Margaret Atwood, who's such a storied author, turned back to this book 35 years after she published it, and just A, what's happened in our world since then, and B, what's happened to The Handmaid's Tale and how it's been reintroduced to audiences through the Hulu series, I think is really remarkable. And then I love it when a book is turned into a TV show or a movie and new readers are brought to it. And then to have a sequel like this is just so exciting.
Now, the sequel, I haven't read the book. I did see the series. I'm current with it. Does the Testaments project the series into the future, or is it a prequel, or where is it set in the story that we know so far?
I will say I haven't watched the series. Interestingly enough, I think the new seasons have come out right around when I've had my kids, and people have said, don't watch it when you have kids. So I have not seen it, but I read The Handmaid's Tale when I was younger, and then I reread it right before I read the Testaments, which if you have time to do, I recommend doing.
Yeah.
And it picks up about 13 years after The Handmaid's Tale ends, and there are new characters and returning characters. Yeah. And I think it definitely, I know people that have not read The Handmaid's Tale that have read the second book, but I would say just to have a complete picture, read them both together.
Yeah. What can you tell us about the Nichol Boys?
It's definitely it's a challenging book to read. It's a novel by Colson Whitehead, and it's about at this point, it's a fictional reform school in Florida, but it's actually based on a real reform school that was, and the time period is during the Jim Crow era South. And these two boys meet there, two African-American boys, and they're pretty different, but they form this unlikely friendship. And it's told in different time periods. So both in the past before the boys enter the reform school, while they're at the school, and then in current day, basically. And it's a challenging book. It's hard to believe that this sort of school existed, but it did. And I think it's important people to read that. And sometimes reading makes us face things that we might not want to hear otherwise, but that's one of the important things about it. And it's beautifully written. It's a fairly slim book. It's very restrained. And he's just a really amazing writer.
And Wild Game?
Oh, have you read this yet?
No.
Oh, you have to read it. Actually, you have to read it because I know that you're a New England person, and
yes. New
England is like a character in this book. So Adrienne Brodeur writes about her childhood and moving forward, and the subtitle explains it all. My Mother, Her Lover, and Me. One night when Adrienne, I think, is about 15, her mother wakes her up, and they're at their home on Cape Cod, and her mother says that this man named Ben, who's not her father or her stepfather, has kissed her mother, and her mother confides in her. And this man is her stepfather's best friend. And so this kicks off this years and years long relationship between her mother and this other man, and she pulls Adrienne, her daughter, in to be complicit in this affair. And it's really confusing for her, obviously. And she's so desperate to win her mother's love and affection. And so she goes along with it. And it really alters her life, too. So she ends up marrying the man that will become her stepbrother at some point. It's sort of a reflection. It's Ben's son. And you see how she's sort of trying to follow in her mother's footsteps and get her approval, but also realizes there's something off there. And we had the opportunity to meet the author, Adrienne Brodeur, a few weeks ago, and she's just incredibly charming. And I think it's really interesting. Her mother is still alive. She suffers from dementia, which is something that she writes in, I think, the foreword of the book. But it's a hard book to read as a parent, but it's also just beautifully written. It has this really clean narrative arc. And it's one of those books like Educated, which was our #1 pick last year, that you read it and it's like, you can't believe this is true life. Yeah. But it is.
So it is a memoir.
It's a memoir.
Yeah. Wow. That does sound powerful. And New England as a character. I think I know that character, but I'll probably
Yes.
learn something more about it if I read another book about it. So, would you like to go through the rest of the top 10 or pick out a few? Or what
I'll
would be
pick out a
good?
few. I
Okay.
lost my mouse. Let me find it.
Okay.
So a couple of the ones that I love the most from the top 10, gosh, I could talk about all of them. I will say Super Pumped, The Battle for Uber by Mike Isaac. This is a great gift book. I would say, like, it's great to read yourself, but if you know anyone that's interested in business, in tech, this is one of those great narrative nonfiction books that reads like a novel, but is actually nonfiction. And it's basically about the history of the company Uber. And I'm reading it thinking, like, Uber didn't exist 10 years ago. And now it's such a part of our lives that it's sort of like Kleenex. Like, you reach for a tissue and you say, oh, may I have a Kleenex? And it's like, oh, I'm Ubering here, but you could be taking any sort of ride sharing service. Again, a term that we didn't really use 10 years ago. And it's just an incredible story about startup culture and the tech culture. And I feel like I learned a lot from it. It's just a fascinating read. The George Takei book, They Called Us Enemy, I feel like is another one of those books that is in a way hard to read, but important to read. So it's a graphic memoir written by George Takei, who was a Star Trek character. And when he was a child, he was put in a Japanese internment camp with his family. And it's told through a child's eyes. So, being on a train and being shipped to these camps and like what that was like for a child, where he thought it was so fun because he's on a train with his family, but really seeing it for what it was. And it's so interesting to think, like, in our lifetime that something like this happened. And it's history that I think we don't talk about a lot, but is really important to read about.
So it's a graphic novel, like a comic book?
Exactly. Yeah,
and
it's a graphic.
How would you describe the art of it? Is it sort of beautiful or kind of traditional Superman comic style? Or?
No, it's, I feel like I'm not really a graphic novel expert, but it's not, it's pretty, but it's also, it takes place in a bleak place.
Yeah.
And I would say, like, it's kind of amazing what you can get from the facial expressions of these drawings. And it's not incredibly lifelike. You don't look at them and think you're looking at photographs, but you can see the pain on his parents' eyes while he's describing something that he thinks is really fun and special. So it's just a really interesting way to tell that story.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Another book I loved on the top 10 is the Laurie Gottlieb book, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. Yeah. And I think you know this. I am totally format agnostic. I read Kindle, I read print, I listen to audiobooks. And this book, for some reason, I really feel like is a book that I wanted to read in hardcover. It is thick, and I keep saying to people, it made me want to curl up in my bathrobe. So I don't know if that means anything, but it's, Laurie Gottlieb is a therapist, and she is going through a tough point in her life where her long-term boyfriend breaks up with her, and she thinks that they're going to get married. So it's very surprising to her. And so she goes to see a therapist herself. And it's about her actual therapy sessions, her patients' sessions, and it's nonfiction. They're covered up, so they're disguised. And then just sort of, and then the other part of the subtitle is The Therapist, Her Therapist, and Our Lives Revealed. And as a sort of, I will call myself curious and not nosy. As a curious person, I loved reading about other people's problems, but you also recognize so much of yourself in these people. And you realize, like, wow, I don't know, it made me want to go to therapy. I don't know if that's a selling point or not. But I'm definitely buying this for people for the holidays. I just thought it was such a cool book. It's so fresh and not like anything I've ever read before.
Wow. Yeah, and there was a lot written about it. That book came out fairly early in the year, didn't it?
It did, yeah. I think it was February or March. That was one of the books that I actually missed when I was on leave. So I read it before we were choosing the top 10. And I tell the team, it's like, those people that when they discover something that someone else has been like, like they're like, oh, have you ever watched Mad Men? It's so good. I feel like I'm like that with that book. Right. I'm like, you should read this book. Maybe you should talk to someone. And like the rest of the team has read it. And to them, it's old news, but I love it.
Yeah, that's good. The 12 categories, which of them, they all have sort of equal numbers of reader or popularity, or are there two or three that just account for way more numbers of books sold than others?
Well, I mean, we're picking this around the end of the year, so it's holiday time. So we want to be mindful of holiday categories. So something like cookbooks, food, and wine, I mean, that's such a great category for gifts. And also, as I was looking through all of our top 20 lists, I was surprised that the science category is actually also like an amazing gift category. There's like some of the books in there are The Body by Bill Bryson. So it's, Bill Bryson's take on the human body. There's a book called Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs? That's basically questions that people write about death. So there is a question literally like, if I die, would my cat eat my eyeballs? And there's someone on the team who sort of owns this category, but also is a cat lover. And I asked her, like, so will the cat eat your eyeballs? And she's like, any cat lover knows, yes, but not first. So that's the answer to that question. And then there's this other book on the science list called The Mosquito. And the team loved this book so much. The subtitle is A Human History of Our Deadliest Predator. So the mosquito, I'm going to totally mess up the facts here, has killed more humans than any other, animal predator ever. And it's sort of, you don't think about it that way. You think like, oh, wow, mountain lions, they're so deadly. You don't think like mosquitoes are very deadly, but they're incredibly deadly, deadlier than sharks. And other predators that we think of. So that's just another, again, just sort of like this interesting book. And yeah, they're in the science category.
Yeah. Are mysteries, thrillers, and suspense separate categories?
It's one. Mystery, thriller, and suspense is one category. And people love those.
Right.
Yeah, again, like great books to buy for gifts, but also, people that are rabid mystery and thriller fans are obviously just like tearing through this list. I love The Silent Patient, which was our top mystery and thriller of the year and also in our top 10. And then I always love Louise Penny. Have you ever read her stuff?
No.
Oh, she's so good. And she is this is the only book. There are people that I like to read in the summer, and Louise Penny is an author that I love to consistently read around the holidays. There's something about her books that just reminds me of the holidays. I don't know why, because they actually take place in different seasons. She cycles through the seasons. So, she'll start in spring and then go to summer, fall, and winter. And they take place outside of Quebec in, I think it's called the Eastern Provinces. And it's a small town called Three Pines. And it's a series with one particular inspector. And they're just, I don't know, they're so atmospheric and I love them. So I'm actually reading A Better Man right now, which is one of the books that was on our top 20 list.
Yeah. Your boys, I assume they're reading pretty soon. Did they get past age 2 before you had them reading, or how soon did you introduce them to books?
It's funny because I mentioned my younger son is named after a character in a book, and I had all the time in the world before I had him, and so I was reading to him when I was pregnant, and he's a really, really good reader. I mean, he's always sat on my lap, and I've read him books, and he's always loved them. We read at least 3 books before bedtime every night, and it sort of changes what he's into. So he loves like airplanes, for instance, and so he loves to read any book about airplanes. It doesn't matter if it's like a grown-up book that's like a textbook on airplanes. He wants to look at the pictures and then he'll say, Mommy, read me the words. Yeah. Or just like he loves silly books too. Dragons Love Tacos and things like that. There's a book called Don't Eat Your Classmates that he thinks is hilarious. So he's into those. But my younger son does not love books as much. He loves to chew them. And it's funny because he just doesn't seem to have the attention span to sit there and like have me turn the pages. He literally wants to just like take the book and shove it in his mouth. So I'm trying with him. He just turned 1.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'm trying, but it's funny because because he's my second, I haven't had the dedicated time to read as much to him as I would like. And I definitely see the difference in them.
Maybe he probably didn't get read to as much before he was born.
He did not. He was just there while I was reading to the other one. So
yeah.
We're working on it, but yeah, they'll definitely both be readers. But I would say, I'm working on the second one. My older son just like loves books, and I will try to limit the amount of toys I buy for him somewhat, but it's sort of like whatever book he wants, he gets.
Yeah, for sure. The list is, I assume, has impact on book sales. And do you, when an author finds out they've made the list, especially high up in the top 100, Do you get any kind of endearing or memorable reactions from authors that find
this
themselves
is
there?
yes, it's like one of the best parts of the job is hearing back from publishers, especially just like, oh, they were so excited and thanking us. We send a list out to publishers basically the second the release goes live so that they see it at the same time. And we let our top adult and children's book authors know through their publishers that they're number one. So you notice there's a quote from Margaret Atwood in our press release. So she knew in advance. And then we get notes like one of the books, and I think it was the top 20, the publisher wrote back and said that like some foreign publishers contacted them about acquiring rights to it afterwards. So that's always really great to see.
Yeah, for sure. Well, given how much you read when you go off on a vacation or somewhere, do you just watch TV, old episodes of Mad Men, or how can you possibly be reading for pleasure?
Well, it's like when they say, if you love something, it doesn't feel like work. I love reading. I can't imagine not reading. So it's funny. I love TV too. I have read or watched a lot less TV since I've been doing this job because I've been reading so much more. But I definitely will take some time and watch TV. I find that sometimes when I fly, I like to watch TV. Although I will say I read the Testaments on an airplane and I didn't even realize I was flying. I was just like totally taken away to another place. But I'm really reading. And I think I wrote a blog post for our blog, the Amazon Book Review, about the books that I was reading on vacation. And I was basically reading books that I had been wanting to read. I wasn't reading for work, basically. And I always read books I want to read for work, but there's also this like internal pressure of like, I'm reading in this month right now, and I can't read further out because I need to focus on, February, or I can't read something older because, it's not time to read that now. We're not considering it for best of. But over vacation, I just really kind of let myself go and read whatever I wanted. Any
top suggestions on your TV shows? What are your habits on
some of the
top series?
I am a typical like middle-aged mom when it comes to my TV watching. So I love This Is Us, that show on, I think it's on NBC. I love A Million Little Things. Is that what it's called? It's again, like these shows, I feel like there's like something, I love it in books too, like the release of when it makes you cry. Yeah. There's a show about publishing called Younger. It's not in a current season right now, but I love that show and it's so fun to watch. It's, I think, a lot more glamorous than at least my life in publishing was, but I love watching it. And it's another thing that we talk about in our team meetings too.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are all my favorite shows.
Good. Well, anything else about the list or the editorial team that we haven't talked about you want to mention?
I will say, so the link to the feature is amazon.com/bestbooks2019. Okay. And beyond the best books in the category, we actually have an editor's holiday gift picks list. So these are different gift picks and they're organized by theme. So everything from coffee table books to books for little kids to gift books under $25. And I'm a gift guide maniac. I'm going to use that word. I love a gift guide. Basically, gift guide season is my happiest time of year. And so this sort of combines both my loves, reading and gift guides. I will read anything that resembles a gift guide. Whole Foods has this sort of like circular they send out that has a great gift guide. Literally anything. So this is a passion of mine. And I love giving gifts, and there are some really great gift books on here. Yeah.
That sounds helpful.
Yeah.
I have been speaking with Sarah Gelman, Director of Books PR and Editorial at Amazon.com. Thanks very much, Sarah.
Thank you. That was so fun.
I want to mention one content item for you that I got a tip from listener John Aga, and there's been a lot of speculation. What is going to be the next Game of Thrones success based on a big book series? And the article that he linked to said it very well could be The Wheel of Time. That's a series originally written by Robert Jordan, who passed away in 2007, and the series was completed by another author. Amazon is working to bring this series to TV next year sometime, to Prime Video, and it's if you want to get a head start reading, I never did read Game of Thrones before I watched the series on HBO. I really loved it. But you can buy all of the books on Kindle for $149.85. That works out to about $10 a book. And I've purchased the first one, The Eye of the World, and that's $10.99. That was published in 1990. I remember someone told me that they had read the Game of Thrones books by George R.R. Martin, and that it was really a good read. So I might just see if I can get into this one as a book before it hits the screen. That's it for this week. Next week, I will be talking with author Robin Cook, who has a new book out, Genesis, published by G.P. Putnam's Sons, release date December 3rd. He has 32 international bestsellers, and he's credited with adding the word medical to the thriller genre. And the one that I'm reading does, it's set with autopsies and lots of things. He's a doctor, so a lot of that part of his writing is apparently authentic. I'll say it's a little bit slow. I think I'm 15% through a lot of characters. It hasn't quite started lift off from the runway for me as a story, but I can see all the elements are in place, and I'll definitely have read it by the time I talk to him next week for next week's show. We'll be leaving tonight after Thanksgiving with my dad and some family out at his place. Hopefully we can dodge all the weather and get to Denver. We'll be overnight at the hotel at the airport and then fly first thing in the morning to Omaha for Stephen and Kira's wedding. And that's an exciting event worth traveling across the country for on Thanksgiving. I hope you have a terrific Thanksgiving and a good day. Thanks for listening. I always appreciate hearing from you at podchronicles@gmail.com. A lot to be grateful for. The technology and reading and books and just the chance to be in community with people of like-minded interests. And I certainly feel a lot of that these days. The Morning Journal seems to be about to solve its problems of latency, so I'm going to be able to put those up immediately or quickly after I record them each morning. And if you'd like to follow along, these are just several minutes of my ruminations first thing in the morning, and you can find them at the Amazon Skills page. Just search for Morning Journal. And an easier way to do it is if you've got an Echo device, simply say Enable Morning Journal, and then if you say, Alexa, what's new? My Morning Journal entry will be there. If that's the only flash briefing you've set up, that's what you'll hear. If you've also got BBC or other news sources, you'll be hearing BBC and then something from Len Edgerly's Morning Journal. It's a fabulous new platform, and I want to thank those of you who have been following along, and we've got 3 reviews on the site. I think that'll help people find it, so if you are listening and you want to leave a review, that would be much appreciated. Take care. Bye.